So you just see a beautiful image, right?
Yes, of the road.
Of the road, and it's going ahead, not behind.
It is, but it is a little curvy and twisty, and it's at the top of a ridge that claustrophobics might have a problem with.
Good.
I'm not claustrophobics, agoraphobia.
Or something.
Something.
The thing is about astrology, Ramurti, you've heard me say this before. It's sort of like Sanskrit. It is a whole universe. It's a vast universe of information, and so to say, it's sort of like saying, well, do you know mathematics or do you know music? Okay, you see what I mean? I'm not trying to be I'm trying to be actually factual. It's a
as opposed to humble.
Exactly. I'm just being factual.
Great. I understand. And somebody just put in the chat, which is of course true. If you're a devotee, you're going to have interest because Sri Yukteswar used astrology.
Exactly. Master astrologer.
Yes, indeed.
So Ramurti, I have two screens up, but you just, I believe you just, one last technical thing. I think you just see the picture, right?
We see the picture and we see your face.
Perfect. Picture is more important than my face, but.
Well, we like to see the faces. In fact, I could say to everyone, what do? We just hit 30. If you can, if you're just willing to let your video show, that's always great for the speaker, because then they actually have an audience that's something more than like a printed page, which is what we get usually with just a name on your space on the screen. So if you can show your video, that's welcome, not required at all. And of course, if you don't want to, that's fine. But if you just haven't thought to do it or were wondering, please switch on your video. I'll just mention, while we're kind of waiting for others to gather, that next week we will not be having one of these Tuesday night meetings. Ananda is having its spiritual renewal week, so all Anandaites around the world, and many of them, not all, but many of them will be tuned in and watching online what we usually go together and in person enjoy at Ananda Village. But it will be going on through, there's a Tuesday night program, and if you're interested at all, you can go over to our website and see how to connect with that for next week. Sunday through Sunday, there will be programs there. So there's no Tuesday night, the Road Ahead program next week, but the following week, Asha Nayaswami will be here. And she spent many years very close to Swami Kriyananda and shared many conversations with him about the road ahead. And so she will be sharing that and her perspective of what Swami felt and thought, and some of the things he wrote in the book, The Road Ahead, other things he shared over the years after that she'll be sharing with us. And then beyond that, we'll have Anand, who is the spiritual director of the Italian Ananda community at Assisi, and he's going to be talking about what communities should be doing to prepare for the uncertain times ahead, and sharing with us what's going on in Assisi, and they're taking perhaps the most aggressive steps to be viable, just whatever turns out in the world, including being off the grid. And then you can check our website to see what other speakers will be coming after that. But it looks now like this series will continue through July and through to the end of August. So we'll have more fascinating speakers for you. Well, it's just wonderful to have Dharma here today. Dharma, I keep looking down in the corner of my screen. I'm not ignoring you. I'm looking at Dharma's picture, which I have to learn not to do, but to look into the camera. Dharma and I have been friends for many years. We worked together in a high-tech business where he was in charge of the technology for the whole business. It was called Computerware. It was the first retail operation back in mid 80s to go all Apple, all Mac, and leave the PC behind. And then we also worked in a very low-tech business together, the used bookstore. We did that too, but we spent a considerable time in the late 80s and the early 90s working together. And we've spent time together in India, where I'll bet he even taught Sanskrit to Indians over there.
A little bit,
not much.
Not much.
But he has taught around the world Sanskrit and shared his understanding of Jyotisha with others around the world. So we're just very, very grateful. And he's a man of many talents. Very few people know this, but Swami Kriyananda actually said that he came the closest to playing Swamiji's piano recital. He came the closest as anyone he has ever heard to playing it as he heard it when he was writing it, as the divine had played for him. So that's quite an accomplishment too. At any rate, I'll be quiet now and let Dharma bring to us his understanding of the road ahead.
Great. Thank you, Ramurtiji. It's wonderful to be here. So let me actually turn on my record here. And I'm going to be a little bit back and forth on with respect to the camera. So please excuse me. I've got a huge screen here that's got all sorts of stuff on it and charts. And so I also am not trying to be rude. And, you know, if you have any questions as we go along today, please ask. I will depend upon Ramurti to help me if I can't find you, but I think the simplest thing to do is just unmute yourself. Is that right, yes. Ramurti?
That's right. We're set up so anyone can unmute themselves. Just try to remember to mute yourself after you're done, so your dog or your child or the train going by doesn't dominate the audio waves. Yeah.
Right. So let me just start then with the image that you see on your screen right now, COVID, karma, and the road ahead. This particular image, I actually bought this image because it really described the way I feel about things at the moment. And there's a lot of symbolism in this picture, and Jyotish, as it's called in India, or astrology, Vedic astrology, is all about symbols. So notice it is a mountain path. You can see some people way up ahead there if you look very carefully. And but it drops off rapidly to either side, right? You're sort of walking on a ridge, on a precipice. And you can't quite see that far ahead. You see something way up ahead, but it looks like a drop off right at the very end there. But way, way in the distance, you see the sun. Okay, so I'm going to go into this. The sun is a big symbol in astrology and a very important symbol as well for people that are on the Kriya path. So I always start everything in terms of classes and so on by so I'm going to ask you to, you don't have to chant out loud. I'll just chant for all of us, but you know, nobody would start anything in terms of Jyotish or Sanskrit without at least a chant to Ganesha. So you can keep your eyes open and look at the image. This is one of my favorite images, but Ganesha is also, you could call, the patron devata of Jyotish as well. So you can listen and I'll chant and then you can repeat silently. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Saraswati is also important, and she's the goddess of wisdom, of course. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. And finally, Surya, the king of the planets. And, you know, we talk about the sun a lot, but the sun really is a symbol of the inner sun. To me, astrology does not make any sense unless you bring it into the spiritual. So this is a very famous piece of a much longer stotram, it's called. It's sort of, I don't know, like a hymn. It's not a very good translation, but it's just a series of verses to each of the planets. And I just want to chant this one because it's so beautiful, and I think it'll set up our class very nicely. Om Japa Kusuma Sankasham Kashyapayam Mahadyutim Tamorim Sarvapapagam Pranatosmi Divakaram. Om Suryaya Namaha. Reverence to that sun which is inside each of us. And finally, to the gurus, without whose guidance we cannot take a step on the spiritual path. Om Shri Gurupyo Namaha. Om Shri Gurave Namaha. So, I always make a plan. Ramurti knows this from our years together. I don't always follow the plan, but at least make a plan. So I have a plan for this session as well. Invocations, which we just did. And I am going to say just a few words about Jyotisha. It's quite different than Western astrology. Jyotisha is the word for Vedic astrology. The words Vedic astrology are very, very loose, in my opinion, not a very good translation of the vast field of Jyotisha. I want to do a look backwards as well as a look ahead and see what's coming up. But we learn a lot by looking backwards too, where we have come. We're going to look at the chart of the United States. It has a chart. It does indeed. And wherever the United States is in its path, Donald Trump is the president. And you would never look at the chart of a country without looking at the chart of the president or prime minister of that country. One of the major themes is going to be Dharma. Dharma is a big, it's how Ramurti and I got talking about, let's do a class on this. Actually, it was Ramurti's idea because it's being impacted right now. And finally, I have a very personal set of ideas for you to consider. What can you do by yourself as an individual? And I will leave some time at the end for final questions and answers, but don't feel limited. If you have a question, if something is not clear, please ask. Okay, what is Jyotisha and how does it differ from Western astrology? I could spend a long time on this, obviously, but I'm just going to say a few words. Jyotisha is actually, it means light, and it's the lore of light. You could say the knowledge, the vidya of light. And so when we think about that a little bit and look into it more deeply, it is a divine science. Now, as it's practiced, of course, people want to know, am I going to get that job? Well, how does it look if I marry that girl? I have Indian clients, and they often, very, very commonly will use astrology to help them understand what it is that I'm getting myself into. Am I married? I'm not just marrying the person, I'm marrying a family. What's that like? So, but the end result of the whole thing is really to help us in our journey of self-realization. We all really, in the end, have the same goal. We want that divine joy. We come to a point in our life, no matter who we are, where we realize it's just not good enough to, we can have all our desires met and still something is lacking. And so the divine science of Jyotisha is set up to allow us or help us or aid us in making that journey. Now, I work primarily with individuals. It does apply to individuals, but it also applies to whole countries. amazingly. And that is our subject today. So what we're looking at when we look at a chart is essentially what are the lessons in that chart. For a human being, what is that person here to learn? It's just from a bigger point of view, it's just one lifetime. So built into this astrology is the notion that we have had previous lifetimes, and that during those lifetimes we have taken certain actions, and those actions have given results. And when we look at a chart, we're looking at, in this lifetime, what are some of the results? What are some of the lessons that we're here to learn in this particular life? Even countries have mass karma. And so I write here, what are the lessons? What is the push and what is the pull? Now that is a very strange statement. Hold on just a second. To make push and pull, has Dharma finally lost it? No, what I'm talking about here is that when you look at a chart, what you're really looking at is a snapshot of what's called technically in Sanskrit is karma pala. Pala is a word in Sanskrit that means fruit or results, and karma means action. Sometimes it's just abbreviated. People say, well, what's your karma? What's your karma, dude? But actually, it's karma pala. It's the results. So you've been doing all sorts of things in other lives, many things, and each thing that you've done have given a result. So you are somehow pushed or pulled in certain directions. You have the conditioning from this life, from your father, from your mother, from your peers, your school, all of that. But there's a deeper push from inside, a much deeper push. What is that? What is that push? What is that pull? Okay. So, what I want to say in addition there on this slide is, you've heard the idea of a planet. We're talking about planets in astrology. It may be shocking to you, but that word is not a word we actually use in Jyotisha. We don't use the word planet, but aren't there planets out there? Aren't we looking at planets? Is the moon a planet? Not really. It's a satellite around the Earth. So the Sanskrit is a much better translation. And what the Sanskrit word that's used, and if there are any Hindi speakers out there, they'll recognize this word. It's used in Hindi. It's graha, Graha. Graha. Graha means that which grabs us. Or, it's like if I grab your arm and I pull you in a certain direction or push you in a certain direction, that's the push and pull. Now, the planets aren't necessarily doing that per se. It's you created your chart. And this is a very important point. You created it. How? By taking certain actions. And so you can uncreate what you have created. You can redo it. Now, it may take time. You may have to put out effort and energy. Indeed, you will. But still, you can do something about it. So I want to give an example because I think it's a very powerful example. There are a lot of people here that are people that are with Ananda, but not everybody. And but most everybody has heard of the great Saint Yoganandaji, Paramahansa Yoganandaji. And the teachings of Ananda are based on his work and the work of his gurus and teachers. Even a great saint, an avatar, has a certain karma when they take on a body and a mind to work on this planet. So I want to use Yoganandaji as a quick example of this, quote, push and pull. Yoganandaji was a Leo. not a Leo in the Western. It's a very, very different system in the Vedic system. And just one word to describe, there are many ways we could describe Leos, but Leos are dramatic, very dramatic. So when Yoganandaji was given his kundali, as it's called in India, his chart, supposedly he tore it in half, threw it on the floor, and stepped on it. In India, throwing it on the floor is already pretty bad. It's considered as something sacred. And then stepping on it to boot, not exactly the most respectful thing to do. And pretty, I would submit to you, pretty dramatic. How about his passing in the Biltmore Hotel, giving a talk with the ambassador of India there, about 200 people in a public setting? He leaves his body at that point. The Mahasamadhi is then. That's also, I submit to you, pretty dramatic. So we have a certain, now a master has, of course, an identity that's much bigger and deeper than just that body, but still, to work with a body, to work with a mind, is to have to work with this conditioning to some extent. By the way, Leos are natural leaders. And I'll talk later in the chart about another Leo who is quite different than Yoganandaji, but still a Leo, and that is President Trump. See, is he dramatic? Whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, I submit to you that that is pretty obvious. He's very dramatic, but he's quite different than Yoganandaji too. So anyway, we'll talk some more about that a little bit later. I also want to briefly mention this, just because mainly because it's fun. The connection to yoga with astrology is very, very deep. There's a lot of information on the screen. I'm going to get a little technical at times because I get so excited about this stuff, and being a lover of Sanskrit, I start throwing in all of this Sanskrit. Just keep relaxed, don't get overwhelmed. The main point I want to make is that, Jyotisha, or Jyotish as it's pronounced in Hindi, is predicated, one of the big how would you say, it's sort of the rishis that helped found this science is Parashara, and Parashara is the father of Vyasadeva. So what, you say? Well, so what is that Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. Again, forgive me, Indians, if you are there. I know you know that, but my American brothers and sisters may not have connected that. He wrote that. The Bhagavad Gita comes from the Mahabharata. Okay, so he wrote other things as well. So his father is a pretty illustrious lineage. His father, Parashara, was one of the main sages that founded this Indian astrology, this Jyotisha, this science of light. And he wrote this text, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, which we abbreviate as BPHS so that we can refer to it in one easy way easy word. Okay, so it's a foundation text. So this stuff is not just, I had this kind of epiphany. I was having a really great but strong cup of chai, and, I had this idea, no, these guys perceive this in deep, deep meditation. So Parashara was an incredibly deep sage and is deeply revered in India, and so was Vyasa. Vyasa is even called Veda Vyasa because of that distinction. This is an artist's rendition of Parashara that I particularly liked. Here's Vyasa doing a class, maybe he's doing an online class, but he's not using the internet. He's just sending images to people out there all over. I don't know. But that's another image that I like. Now, I'm just going to say a couple of things before we launch into the actual look at the astrology of the United States, because it really helps put everything in perspective. And this is from BPHS, this Shastra, this scripture that is very famous, that is widely used, that Parashara, well, he wrote some of it, his students compiled some of it. We don't really know how it all got put together. Some of it's a bit lost, but this part is supposed to be one of the more authentic parts. And this is my translation of it. But it's a very interesting one, and it harkens back to what I said about astrology a few minutes ago. It's just saying that God, the unborn one, Aja, has many divine incarnations. We know them as Rama, Krishna, and so on. But he's taken the form of the Grahas, meaning what you would call in American English, the planets, as the givers of the action fruits of the individual souls. He is the giver of moksha. Now, if you think about this, if you meditate on this, and by the way, moksha means liberation. It doesn't mean something you drink. That's mocha. The little difference in the letters there. If you need to understand more about moksha, please call Ramurti up. He's an expert on this. So why am I putting this up here? What's so important about this? Because this is the universe's way of teaching you. The universe is trying to teach you. It's trying to, and Yoganandaji writes about this in his autobiography, is trying to help you grow spiritually. Now, I admit the universe, as somebody said, is a very, very harsh guru. It's not going to just, say, now, if you feel like it, Dharma, you should try. No, it may hit you over the head repeatedly. But the idea is it does it by looking at the results of the actions that you've taken and giving you those results. Okay, so if you were a vicious murderer in one lifetime, then you're going to get the results of that. There's a story of Yoganandaji. One day he was holding somebody, a mother came to give a baby to be blessed to the master, and he said. Later, he said he almost dropped that baby because he saw that baby's past life as a vicious murderer. But of course, we see just the innocent, sweet little baby there. A master can see much, much more than that. So here it is, spelled out a little bit more clearly. The idea is, it says that from a deed, these planets, these energies, we could think of them, were brought into existence to destroy the strength of the demons, to increase the strength of the gods, and to reestablish Dharma. Now, I'm going to talk about Dharma because it's a big theme and it's under attack right now, in my opinion. That's one of the themes of this particular class today. So you read that and you go, oh, demons, gods, and you start to think externally. No, this is inside of you. You have demons inside of you? Well, yeah. Actually, if you identify with your body and mind, which we all do for the most part until you're very far up the spiritual mountain, yes. And so the universe is conspiring deliberately to take you along a path that will give you greater joy, give you a more expansive way of looking at things, and help to reestablish Dharma. So the purpose of Jyotish then is to help in that process of reestablishing Dharma. And I'll give you a definition of Dharma in a little bit. Sometimes I don't know what slide to put in next because there's so many things to say, but Dharma, one way to think of it is doing what's appropriate. Okay. Planets. Again, I'm kind of building you all up so that when I start talking about charts, you're gonna be able to have some idea. We have 9 planets or grahas in the Jyotish system. We don't look at asteroids in the Western system. They do. They look at all sorts of things. Some Jyotishis or practitioners of Jyotish are now starting to use the so-called outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Some are not, but this is the classical formation. I'm a kind of classical guy, so I always start with this. I'm just showing these are the abbreviations I'm going to use. And you'll notice that you'll recognize all of these. And then we have this Rahu Ketu business. Turns out Rahu is a really, really important planet right now. And I'm going to explain what Rahu does a little bit later, because the United States is in a period that's focused on Rahu. So here's a symbol of Ketu, Rahu and Ketu. These are the symbols. I just love this image. And I'm showing you that Jyotish is directly related to nature. The Divine Mother is nature. Her body is nature, is the universe, you could say, just to keep it simple. And if you look here at the top of the screen, the symbol on the left here is Rahu, the symbol on the right is Ketu. Doesn't that look a lot like Ketu? And when the snake has come down like this with his head down, it's going to turn into Rahu. Are Rahu and Ketu associated with snakes? Yes, they are. Very much so. Anyway, absolutely fascinating. All right, we come to the chart of the United States. Now, you might say, Dharma, sorry to say you made a mistake there. You actually put two charts up. Well, I guess you could see it that way, but not really. It turns out that there are two chart formats. The chart on the left, which is what I like to use, is the North Indian. The chart on the right is South Indian. And is one better than another? No, they show exactly the same thing. Now, this chart is a snapshot at the birth of the United States, you could say. When we look at a human chart, we usually use the birth time, okay? And what is the birth time? Even that is a deep philosophical question. If I have a mother that's pregnant and wants to, is asking me about the birth of her child, what should I do? I will have her get all sorts of times for me. I usually suggest she appoint somebody whose only job is to get the time, not her husband. So the time of the first breath is extremely important. Okay, that's one time, and that's the time we usually try to get, because that's when we're actually separating from the mother and the prana is now moving in our own body. But the time of the first crowning of the baby's head showing, all this, there's lots of ways to look at this. Sri Teshwar points out the time of conception. You can make a birth chart for a person if you know the time of conception. Most people don't know that. They're not sitting around taking notes about all of these things, unless maybe if they're an astrologer, they might. But other than people like me that are crazy about all of this stuff, we have to use the time when they are born. So what about the United States? This chart was, I'm using the chart that James Kelleher, the very famous astrologer, excellent astrologer. And he spent a whole summer trying to figure out exactly what the right time of the birth of the United States is. You could use the First Continental Congress. Well, that's a pretty important point. Yeah, but he was doing research. And this is what he came up with. And he's such a great Vedic astrologer. I'll go with him. And it turns out that Vamadeva Shastri, also known as David Frawley, uses something pretty close to this. So I feel I'm in good company if I use this particular chart. Now, there's a lot of stuff on here. Again, don't get overwhelmed by this. Okay, all of these different colors just represent planets. Okay, Ke is Ketu, Mo is Moon, and so on. Ma is Mars. Here's Rahu down here. And I want to talk about this in a little more detail.
So Dharma?
Yes, sir.
Can you say what that point was that was the birth of the United States? I mean, well, was it the Declaration of Independence, or was it some other event that this is based on the time of?
Yes, I think I can, but not right now. I don't recall
sorry.
what. No, it's a great question. I'm happy to entertain all questions. If I don't know, I will simply say I don't know. I think he was using some of the events that were happening around the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's my recollection. I'm not 100%, but I'm like 95% sure. So my recollection is that he was using the signing of the Declaration of Independence, because July 4th, in other words, okay, is such a iconic date for the United States psyche that everybody knows July 4th, Independence Day. Okay, so he was using that, and then it becomes a question of what time do you use on that day, and that's where the research came. So that's my best answer at that. So, okay, so if this were a person sitting in front of me, I would start talking about their main classification. The United States is a Sagittarius. Okay, now, again, what you think you know about astrology and from Western stuff and what you actually, and what Jyotish is different. The sun is down here in Gemini, and it's all shifted back. It doesn't match up with what you might think in Western. There are two different systems. That's the main thing to keep in mind, okay? So the Western system, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all, it's an excellent system. It just works differently. It's a seasonally based system. In the springtime, at the vernal equinox, you know, basically the Western astrologers say, oh, it's spring. This must be 0 degrees Aries. Okay, Aries is the start of things, the strong energy. Spring has come, spring has sprung. But in fact, if you could see the stars at that point, because they use the high noon when the sun is the highest in the sky, it would be, the sun would be in Pisces. It's just physics, and I don't want to get into it now because it's very technical and very, it would require a good 20 minutes to explain properly. The main thing you need to understand is that we don't like, we will look at the sun. It's certainly very, very important, but it's much more interesting to look at the sign, the constellation that was on the eastern horizon at the moment of birth or at the moment that we're looking at. So in this case, on the eastern horizon was the constellation Sagittarius at the moment that this particular chart was drawn. So for your birth chart, then, we're going to look at the moment you took your first breath, and you know that's going to be pretty close to the birth certificate. And why is that deemed so important? Why not the sun? The sun only, if you think about it, the sun only changes its constellation, or as it's called in Western astrology, its sign, every month. But the constellation on the eastern horizon changes every 2 hours. In 24 hours, there are 12 constellations. 2 times 12, 24. So about 2 hours, it gets into mathematics with the longitude and the latitude and stuff, but approximately every 2 hours. It's a much more accurate sort of idea of what this person's about. So what is a Sagittarius about? They are idealistic. They are philosophical. The United States was founded around ideals of the rights of a person. So a Sagittarius, and again, if I was doing a reading for a Sagittarius, I would be speaking, oh, you're adventurous. And I'd be using other things in the chart, but Sagittarius tend to be adventurous and pioneering. It's a brand new country that was started. The United States is very adventurous, progressive. These are all just words that I'm throwing out to you. Positive and optimistic, very active and dynamic people. It's a fire sign after all. And benevolent. These are carefully selected words that describe a Sagittarius person in very general terms. Does that sound a bit like the United States? It does to me. But wait, there's more. And I'm just doing just a very general introduction to, of the chart of the United States. What's more is that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Again, you might say, okay, thank you for sharing, Dharma. So what? Well, we look at where Jupiter is placed, and Jupiter is placed in the area of the chart that has to do with business. Okay, with business. See this part of the chart down here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 planets here and 2 over here. So this whole bottom part of the chart is very top heavy. It's all about relationships. If I have a person in front of me, I'm going to say, I'm thinking to myself, this person's very outwardly focused. They're always looking at what the other guy is doing. And they're a little bit off balance. They're top heavy, or in this case, bottom heavy. Okay? So is the United States focused on business? Oh yeah. David Frawley said his description of the United States is basically a mercantile country. Now, that's not entirely true. And I'm sure he would agree with the fact that Jupiter is a very spiritual planet in general, a natural benefic. But anyway, the point is that Jupiter is placed here in relationships, in business. And those are certainly key things in the United States. I could spend, again, an hour or two just talking about this. But I want to place your attention down here in this part of the chart. This is, it's the 8th house. And you might say, well, wait a second, Dharma, I see a 4 there. How can that be the 8th house? That's how this particular format works. If I count 1, 2, 3, all the way through, I get to 8 here. This means it's the 4th constellation. Okay? Sagittarius, Cancer. So there's a period of time that we use in this Jyotish system. It's nice to see all this, but people want to know, when am I going to get that job, Dharma? When am I going to get that girl or that guy? When am I going to get married? When will I have a baby? How does the year ahead look? And Jyotisha is an incredible system for timing. There are many, many timing systems. We are in a Rahu period right now, we meaning the United States. I'm going to go into a little more depth about this, but Rahu is a planet, wait for it, that's associated with pandemics. Are we having a pandemic in the United States? Yes, I was just looking at the New York Times this morning. I think we still have a lot of cases. I don't know, like we're number 4 in the world now with number of cases or something. I don't know, it's big. Rahu is the planet of technology. Have we done a lot of work in technology in the United States? Yes. Will this period bring us a lot more, progress in the realm of technology? Yes, it will. But this particular part of the chart is a very challenging one for both individuals and nations because it brings massive change, massive upheaval. If I see a planet that's associated with relationships in this house for a person, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it could be a gut-wrenching sort of drama. Now, I have to see corroboration. I'm not just going to go off of one thing. They say 3 logs makes a fire. I got 2 right now. Rahu's a planet that says, let's have a revolution. And it's placed in the 8th house of a lot of change. So I got 2 logs going. I can add another pile of logs on there, but yes, we can say a time of massive change, just at a first glance like that. Now, this Rahu is a very shifty planet. It changes, and its nature is to change to what it takes on disguises, you could say. It's called a Chaya Graha, a shadow planet. It's associated with eclipses. And here you see right next to it Mercury. Okay, Mercury is right next to Rahu. That means, in this case, that during this period, the period can seem like a Mercury period. And what's Mercury about? In general, Mercury is a symbol for communications. It's a symbol as well for, it can be a symbol for technology. And notice this particular Mercury is retrograde. Again, we've all heard about Mercury retrograde. I remember you, Sita, telling me once long ago, oh, Mercury's retrograde. We all have heard these things. Mercury's retrograde. A retrograde planet, actually, it means it's exceedingly strong. But in the charts of people and nations, we actually want to see, when we see a planet that's retrograde, if we could look up in the sky, the planets are all moving along a certain way, and then one planet seems to go backwards. It's as if you're reading along in a book and you say, oh, this is really important. I'm going to underline it. And so the same is true for individuals and nations. We look at this and we go, the United States needs to work on what Mercury represents in its chart. And Mercury controls not only business and actions and presidents, but it also has to do with relationships within the country, boundaries, So the race relationship stuff that's going on that we hear about in the news with the killing of George Floyd, it's absolutely completely appropriate for the United States to be working through this. If we have time, I've got a whole bunch of charts. I'll show you some charts around this. It's appropriate because this particular country has a kind of destiny, you could say, to work on that. Okay, that's a lot of stuff there, but any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to take the silence for no questions at the moment. And so this is what I said. So the timing is based around 120 years. What do I mean? What this means is that the timing system that's the most common is called Vinchotri. And it's a timing system that the sages perceived in meditation. And it's a cycle of 120 years. Now, most human beings don't live that long, at least in this age. And so they don't get to go through all the cycles, but a country will. And so we have 9 major periods. One period is associated with each of these different planets. Okay, remember before we had 9 planets, we have 9 periods. So it's so beautiful to see how the Divine Mother, when she's working with us, which she does with this karmic, reward system that she has set up, when she's working with us, she puts a particular planet, you could say, in charge. So it's kind of like, and that particular planet winds up getting a little more emphasis. It's sort of like having a 9-piece band. This is the way I've described it to clients. You have a 9-piece orchestra or a 9-piece band, and everybody's playing along, but then we turn the volume up. Maybe we want to hear the guitarist do something or the keyboardist do something. So the sound engineer in the back, the Divine Mother, turns up the volume. So everybody else is still playing, but we just can hear that a little bit more readily. Okay? So if we go through a particular period like the Rahu period, each period has a certain length, and there are some common characteristics for everybody, but it works a little bit differently in each person's chart, including the charts of nations. So I said Rahu is associated with pandemics. Does that mean in everybody's chart, if we look, any country, if we look where Rahu is placed, where they're going to have a pandemic around that time? No. There are lots of timing systems in Jyotish. I'm just talking about the main one. So I'm talking about a major period and a minor period. So you are born into a major period. You could be born into Rahu, you could be born into the period of the moon, and there are different lengths. Some are, like a Venus period is 20 years long. It's a long period for a human being. And so if you grew up with, if you were born into a Venus period, it's going to, and if you didn't die in the middle of a Venus period, it's going to last 20 years. So for everybody that goes through a Venus period, it will last 20 years. But if you were born in the middle of it, it won't. If you die in the middle of it, it won't. It's the same with countries. So I'm talking about that as a major period, Mahadasha, and a minor period, an Antardasha. So here they are. Just thought I'd spell them out for you. So the United States is in a Rahu period. It's 18 years long. Okay, and it turns out, very interestingly, Rahu is a planet of revolutions. And I learned so much about history while I was, preparing a little bit, some of these slides for the class. The birth of the United States occurred in a Rahu period. So we had a cycle of Rahu periods. Now, again, if a human being is born, say they're born here in a moon period, anybody, again, that goes through an entire moon period, it will last 10 years. And then the next period will be a Mars period, only 7 years long. And then they'll come to a Rahu period. So, so you can start to see if they start at the very beginning of the moon period, at around 17 years old, 18 years old, they're going to start a Rahu period. So it's the same for the countries. And we started our Rahu period September 28th, 2015. This is the key date. And this is what really is very, very interesting to look at. I already told you The Rahu period is 18 years long. And I want to say a little bit more about Rahu and what it's doing in the chart of the United States. So Rahu, as I just said a moment ago, is the planet of revolution. It's a planet, it has to do with sudden changes, the unexpected. Just think for a moment, friends, just think. If you, before this COVID virus hit, if I said to you, look, the United States financial markets are going to practically collapse, everybody's going to get, you know, the unemployment rates are going to go up so high, it's going to surpass the Great Depression, you would say, Dharma, you really have lost it this time. And yet there are astrologers in India who did predict this, and not many, but they did. So Rahu is associated with sudden changes, with the unexpected. With this unexpected, yes. It's also associated with changeability, inconsistency. Rahu is the planet of urgency. When I meet a person that's in the Rahu period, they are on fire. So how does Rahu want to help us learn during this period? It wants to help us learn by getting out of balance. Okay? How would that help us learn? Well, it's only when you open your eyes and see that you are out of balance that you can then take steps to get back into balance. Rahu is associated with foreigners, with foreign places. Is there a big emphasis in this Rahu period since 2015? Trump took office in 2016. Has there been a lot of focus on immigration, on foreigners? I humbly submit, yes. Rahu is, these are all common associations with Rahu. And all I'm doing is just looking at the symbology. This is how this works. Rahu is associated with lies and lying. Have we had problems with that during the Rahu period? Again, I think we have. But Rahu is also associated with new technology. So there's lots of ways to look at it. But Rahu is, one more thing I'll tell you, it'd be like, you know, if you are in a Rahu period, for countries in a Rahu period, it's like you are sparring with a martial artist, a master martial artist. And you go to kick him, and he says, very quickly in his mind, he notices you're kicking him, and he says, oh, and he says, let me help you. And so he lifts your leg a little higher so that now you're really out of balance and you fall on your back. Oh, sorry, you fell on your back. Now you might learn something, maybe that's not the best thing to do. So Rahu teaches us by deliberately, as individuals, getting us out of balance, and as countries to force us into extreme positions, into extreme ways of looking at the world. It was pretty extreme when the United States got started. No, we're not going to do the way you've done. We want to worship the way we want to worship. And we don't want to be taxed, by the way, either, while we're at it, without being represented, and so on. So, go to the next slide here. Let me just skip that. I get so excited about this stuff. I get into it pretty deeply, but I'll just mention this very, very briefly. This is unique to the system of Jyotish. There are a set of Vedic constellations, and I'm just about to talk about this, so I'm just mentioning. The only thing you need to know is this very top line. It says Vedic constellation. There's a set of 27 Vedic constellations. It's a really old part of Jyotish and absolutely fascinating. It's smaller than what I'm calling the 12 big boys, the ones you've heard of: Scorpio, Sagittarius, Leo, all of that. And there's lots and lots of symbolism with this. And it's fascinating to me because it's a very ancient part of the system. And why am I bringing that up in the middle of this all of a sudden? Because I want to tell you about about this particular Vedic constellation. Now, around September 27th last year, Rahu went into this particular constellation, this Vedic constellation. And this is how I'm giving you a little I'm scratching a little bit deeper below the surface. This is what a Jyotishi has to do. Here's the symbolism that's associated with it, some of the symbolism. Ardra literally means in Sanskrit, the moist one. It's associated. Each of these has a symbol. There's a Shakti, on and on. Lots of symbolism around this. It's associated with the teardrop or sweat, moisture. Are you getting it yet? Viruses. Oh, I have to wear a mask because moisture is coming out of my mouth. Did it spell it out clearly with a PowerPoint presentation? No. It's left for your own, as the astrologer, for your own analysis and intuition. It's associated with the power of effort. Have people been really trying to deal with this? I think so. The Devata, the aspect of the divine, is associated with Rudra. Rudra in ancient Vedic symbolism is associated with storms. We've had a storm all over this planet. Now, and it's associated with gaining lordship over animals. This is one of the areas that I want to speak about because it directly relates to one of the themes in this class. Before I do that, I just mentioned this word, the transit of Rahu. What does that mean? Okay, just think about this for a moment and realize that at a certain moment in time you were born. And there's a snapshot. We take a picture of what was going on in the sky at that point. Now, after you're born, time goes on and things move. Jupiter in particular is moving around. Saturn is moving around. I say in particular because Jupiter is associated with spiritual development to some extent. And so I'm looking at this transit of Rahu. That's pretty interesting. On September, it's kind of forecasting going into Ardra. I was going to put something else here, but I'm just a boo-boo on the slide. So you have the symbolism there, just from one particular constellation. And why did I pick Rahu out of all 9 planets? Because the United States is in a Rahu period, and we're trying to get an idea of what's going to happen in the United States. So if I'm following the chart of the United States and I see all of a sudden Rahu going into that particular constellation, I'm starting to think about this symbolism. I'm starting to wonder, will there be a storm? Will there be, and there are other things that will indicate disease and so on. And guess where it started? In an animal market, we think. Okay? And not a normal animal market. An animal market that is a so-called wet market. There's a famous astrologer in India. Those who are Indians in the audience have heard of him. He's just straight up says, you can't keep eating whatever you want. You can't just take any animal out of the wild and eat it. It is against Dharma. It is inappropriate. And you will suffer if you do that. He says, and he's right, I believe, it's very simple. The karma of a nation, the results of a nation, is not due to some little virus. It's not due to anything but the results of all the individual actions we have taken as a country, as a people. Add those all up and you get this kind of effect. And indeed, because this is a transit that's happening for the entire world, we can't keep acting in the way we have. We are out of balance. We are out of balance. And we, in particular, and this is how we got this class today. I said to Ramurti, I don't know what we were chatting about, but something had nothing to do with it. And I said, oh yeah, this is Dharma is really being affected. Not me, Dharma, but big Dharma. It's really being affected right now and has been. And I've been concerned about this. We're really about this for years because I see it going down. I see that there's an increase of people doing that which is inappropriate. So let's carry on here. So here is the backstory, you could say. Again, this is the chart of the United States. Now, dear ones, please don't hit the freak out button with all this information. I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of it. There are 2 charts here. There's an outer chart, which represents the transits. There's the inner chart, which is the United States. And I'm looking at, I was saying, okay, well, what did the chart of the United States look like at the start of America's Rahu period in 2015? I think that was a reasonable question to ask. So here's the transits. Here's Rahu. Okay. Now Rahu. So first of all, let's talk about Jupiter, because this is probably the main point I want to make today. Jupiter represents Dharma, doing that which is appropriate. And I can go a little bit more into this if we have time. Doing what is appropriate. And Jupiter moves through this outer ring here, all the planets in the sky at exactly September 28th, 2015, Monday, 8:44 in the morning. This is what they looked like. So Jupiter is one symbol for Dharma. It's a universal symbol for everybody. Now, in the United States, Jupiter is placed in the area of the chart that has to do with Dharma, which is ruled in the chart of the United States by the sun. And what I want to point out to you is that here's Mars. Mars is, the technical word is afflicting Jupiter. It's pushing on Jupiter. Jupiter is fairly strong here, but it is under attack by Mars. It turns out it's also under attack by Saturn. It turns out that the sun, which is the planet that represents Dharma for the United States, is also under attack by Rahu. In fact, what was going on is there was an eclipse. The day before the Rahu period started. Fascinating to me, at least. I didn't know this, frankly. I'm too busy doing charts for individuals. So I just started looking at it just like like it was a person. And so what do I have here? It turns out the moon is eclipsed, and if it looks about like this. It's not much difference. Yeah, not much movement here. So and it turns out it wasn't just any old time, it was the day before. So what does that tell me? Just think about it for a moment. It's the start of a Rahu period, and the day before it happens, there's an eclipse. What is the big deal about eclipses? Eclipses are nature's way of saying, maybe you should go inside. It's turning off the lights. Maybe you should meditate a little bit. Maybe you should, chant the name of God. Maybe you should do a puja. How about a little extra prayer during the eclipse? I'm turning the lights off so you won't be distracted. So how much of a hint do you want to get from nature? Like that's nature's being extremely dramatic here. And this particular anyway, let me just say there's a lot here that we can learn. This particular combination here of K2 and the moon, you don't know what K2 is, but I'm just saying, when I see this in a person's chart, I'm thinking they're a very private person. When we apply it to the country, I'm thinking, this is a country that says it's just about us. Let's make America great again. Okay, that's what Donald Trump ran on. Let's make America great again. We're gonna pull back a little bit. We're gonna not be out on the stage of life. Anyway, I could go on and on about it. So the other thing here that, and this is going to symbolize, what I'm trying to do right now with you is just talk to you about an 18-year period before I drill down onto a sub-period that we're in, which is about all I'm going to have time for. This is a combination for justice, Mars and Jupiter. This is somebody who is going to say, no, this is not appropriate. So when you see this in an individual, you'll see people like that have that combination. There'll be military people, there'll be police officer. No, you can't do that. And so with George Floyd, and I I actually created a chart for that. Probably won't have time today to do that. But, you know, Mars becomes very active. Mars is the police. And we're going to have in this period, we're going to look at what's just, what's appropriate, what is Dharma. Now, as Jupiter moves, again, this is just a transit. It's the same for everybody. Jupiter is in Leo right now at this particular time. And it's going to move. It moves through one of these constellations a year, approximately. Okay? This is why somebody said, Ramurti probably knows the answer to this. He's a kind of a scholar guy. And somebody said, might have been Master, might have been Kriyanandaji, that Jupiter, that your spiritual development moves in 12-year cycles. Your spiritual development moves in. Why? Because Jupiter moves through one constellation per year, approximately, the transit of Jupiter. Now, Jupiter's in your chart in a particular place, but as it's moving around, it's affecting you. Those transits affect you. Okay, so Jupiter was transiting through this, just as Rahu started, Jupiter is transiting through this area of has to do with Dharma. And then it's going to move into this area, and to this area, and to this area. And I was concerned about this because I'm going, okay, let's see. This doesn't look so hot for the United States. And as we get up here, when we get, Jupiter's going to move, you know, you just roughly count 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, as we start to move into 2019, 2020, Jupiter's going to wind up right here. And again, all I'm doing is saying Jupiter goes through one of these years. Yes, it goes retrograde and so on, but it's going to wind up here approximately. So what? Well, this is, and so what is, Saturn's going to be waiting here for it. That's where we find ourselves right now. Saturn is waiting here. Okay, it's here. There's a lot, and Jupiter will be what's called in Sanskrit nicha, debilitated. It's going to be weak. Again, Jupiter, the symbol of Dharma, getting to a point where it's really weak and it's surrounded by the bad boys that are going to help the United States work through its karma. And that's where we find ourselves poised right now. And I saw this coming, as did many astrologers see this coming. And that's what I meant when I said to Ramurti, I'm concerned, you know, about the decline of Dharma. Now, let me just back off for just a moment here and tell you something very interesting. Just take a deep breath. That was a lot of information there. Here is our timing system. Here's the beginning of the United States. Okay, it's going 1776. This is the starting time. The United States started September 28th, 1775 in the Rahu period. But during that time, the United States was born. And so 120 years passes, and in 1895, another Rahu period starts. And in 2015, the third Rahu period starts. That's what we're in right now. And why is that significant? Because these patterns tend to repeat, my friends. They repeat. So if you want to understand our period, you can begin to look back in time a little bit. And I think whoever's doing the class on yugas should talk about this a bit from another point of view, from the yuga point of view. But just from the astrological point of view, this is a very busy slide, but just look at the big headings here. Technology was taking off. The first movie films were being made. Okay, this is in the period of the Rahu period, 1895 to 1913. There are going to be similarities to our period. Technology is still going like gangbusters. Einstein's theory of relativity came out in 1905. Was that in this period? Yes, it was. And guess what? Epidemics were breaking out. Typhoid fever in 1903. It was considered and is considered one of the top 10 health events in the US, this 1903. In other words, an epidemic happened. Polio virus started coming up very strongly during this time. We had all sorts of epidemics, and even the Spanish flu. Now that's outside of this period, 1913. That's for another reason. During this time, immigration was a big deal. All of these things should sound familiar to you because they're occurring again. The universe works in patterns. And so I'm showing you this to show you we are experiencing this pattern again. Please excuse me with the busyness of the slide, but I got very excited about the history here. So here is a look from the New York Times of the new reported cases of COVID-19. And what I was interested in, I look at the New York Times among other papers, and I saw, okay, look at this big increase here, right? And it looks like it's going up again. But where this really starts to take off in March, right here, somewhere in this time frame. So I thought that would be very interesting to look at astrologically. Can we see that? Nope, I can't see that. But slide out of order. I can tell you, we don't have a lot of time left, but I can tell you, yes, we can easily see that. And it's completely mirrored in the astrology of the United States. So what I want to get to is just a couple of things about Dharma. And I have a slide on what you all can do. Dharma is a word, because this is the main point I'm trying to make to you. One of the main points is the decline of Dharma that we've been seeing lately over the last few years. I could probably spend 2 hours just tracing it through. It's a very hard word to define in a single English word. Usually you see it defined as religion or duty, righteous living. For me, as a Sanskrit lover, it comes from dre, to hold, to support, to maintain. So you're doing that which maintains. And I already said that's globally represented by Jupiter. And I pointed out that Jupiter has been under, you could say, under attack, the way it's been moving as a transit through the through the universe, through our universe. So again, I was just trying to show, here it is in March. Probably should have put that slide back when those cases were increasing. Here's where Jupiter is just about ready to go into here. Here it is, okay, the symbol of Dharma about to cross over. This is the transit of Jupiter in March 2020, about to go over here. Again, so what? Well, so what? Jupiter is at its weakest. It's like Jupiter has COVID. I mean, he's really sick when he goes. He just has no energy here. No offense to Brihaspati, to Jupiter, but he just is very weak here. Debilitated, Nietzsche, whatever you want to call it. But he's also got two guys that are going to sort of push on him a bit. Okay, and when you combine all that together, you have a problem. On top of it, the sun, which is why I put this in, the sun represents Dharma for the United States, and it's being attacked by Saturn. And on top of that, Ketu is sitting here. So if this is a person sitting in front of me, and I see this about to happen in March, I'm going to be sitting there going, how do I tell this person that they're going to get pretty sick? Probably. And that they need to really get a checkup, take care of themselves. They're in a Rahu period. Don't get out of balance. Keep your center. Don't get freaked out. That's where we found ourselves in March. So my take on this period of time that we are in is that this particular virus, this particular event in our lives is a spiritual wake-up call for us. A spiritual wake-up call because we are never going to get to the point where we can manipulate the outer world to our satisfaction. Not only that, now a lot of the things that we have been able to be dependent upon are being limited. We can't just say, hey, let's go to a movie tonight. Not the same deal. Not the same world at all. I skip this. The highest dharma is nonviolence. This, I believe that if you want to do something, I'm going to give you a list of things to do. I have a homework assignment, sort of, that you can do, or things that, attitudes and so on that you could work with. But this is out of the Shastras, which I love. Ahimsa paramo dharma. The highest dharma is nonviolence. It is fascinating to me that this virus started in a market where animals from the wild are butchered. You want to help, I'm sorry to say, or actually I'm not sorry, become a vegetarian. It's appropriate. And I'm not the only one saying this. This man, Abhigya in India, young man, sort of an incarnated rishi, he just flat out said, no, you can't eat whatever you want. This is not going to work. And you can't keep destroying the environment. It's not going to work. These are all forms of violence. You can't keep speaking violently. Just think back, those of you that have been on the path a long time, think back when you first learned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. What's the first yama? Ahimsa. And it's the first one for a reason, because it's the most important. And you see it translated, oh, yeah, you don't kill anybody. You check it off your list. You go, okay, I'm not killing anybody. That's good. Actually, and I'm done. I'm on to the next one. No, no, no. It's a very, very deep, deep, deep subject. Are you really nonviolent in action, in word and thought? Okay. I'm going to stop and leave some time for questions here, but I want to just show, here's the lunar eclipse in 2015 that I was talking about. It's so significant. The day before, and remember, Trump's coming into office in 2016. This all happened around the same time, and we're working with symbols here. Look at this dark part of the screen. I hope you can see that. Ramurti, can you see that okay? Yeah, okay. So this is where the path of the eclipse went. It's going right through Washington, D.C. It's a very dark time. It's not a good thing to start a period in an eclipse. You're going to get a shadow effect happening. It's going to cause suffering, and it's going right through. There was the great eclipse that happened as well, but that's another subject. But this is not a good way to start a period. So what I see going forward, do I think this is going to be what Yoganandaji spoke about? You know, I don't really know. Who am I to say? You know, about what a great master is seeing. I do think that, which we didn't get time to get all the technical stuff, but these areas are going to be definitely affected. Housing, education, environment, and we see that already happening. When you have a good astrology reading, it should match up with what's on the ground. Our actions with respect to other people will continue to be a major point of focus going forward. Our beliefs about other people. Please excuse this shorthand. This is my way of jotting reminders to myself. This Rahu period will continue to be a time of great change and upheaval. Hold on just a second here. I want to, yeah, I'm going to talk about that if I have time. It is associated with food, because this eclipse that occurred just before Rahu, it turns out it's associated with the nakshatra, with the Vedic constellation that is called Revati. Revati is about food. It's a nakshatra, a constellation of food. The devatas act out symbolically what's going to happen. And what happened? Pushan ate something that he should not have eaten. He ate a sacrifice, and he got his teeth knocked out, literally, for that. Again, to me, it points back to, I'm not trying to be politically correct here or incorrect or anything, but again, I've seen major astrologers in India talk about this, and I agree. It makes sense to me that you can't keep beating up other forms of life, including the Earth, which is the Divine Mother's body, one of the planets that represents her body. Now, so I'm just going to briefly mention this because we only have about 10 minutes left. We are coming into the Rahu-Saturn period. We're in Rahu-Jupiter right now, and this is a snapshot of that period. Okay, it's a snapshot of the period when the election is going to happen. November 3rd, 2020. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at Donald Trump's chart. Here's a chart of Donald Trump. He is a Leo, by the way. And just a couple of words about him. Mars in the first house with a Leo like this makes for a really aggressive guy. Super, you know, you who are Ayurveda, Pitta, big time Pitta. He was born on an eclipse. All sorts of things are associated with his chart. And unfortunately, I was a little ambitious about what I chose to put out here for you all. But I can say that, in my opinion, this is an accurate chart for him because this Mars temperament, Mars is a very aggressive, violent, rash planet, and it's placed in the area of the chart that has to do with the person's personality. The Vedic constellation that Mars and that Donald Trump was born into is called Magha, and it means the Great One. It's associated with a throne room. It's associated with a palanquin. You know, you carry a king around in like a stretcher. It's associated with that. Okay, so it's associated with kings. On and on. It's fascinating. So we have an accurate representation of his chart, and so the question becomes: all of this, I was going to go into more detail, out of time. No, I don't think so. I do not think so. I don't think Trump will be reelected. Is he going to fight about it? Absolutely. Will there be all sorts of stuff there? I think there will be litigation around it going forward, around the presidency. I think he will fight tooth and nail. And here's Biden's chart, the one I'm using anyway. Now this looks like the chart of somebody who's going to have a career change, a big one, and a very nice one. The Scorpio, you know, the Lagna Scorpio, but a very, I think Biden's going to win. I think he is going to have to also, to some extent, fight for it. The chart of Donald Trump does not look like the chart of somebody who's going to be president again, to me. The last thing that I want to talk about today, before I open up for questions a little bit, is what you can do. I think that the best thing you could do is learn how to meditate. You don't have to spend eons of time learning how to meditate. You can actually learn a few basic techniques and go a long, long ways with just learning how to work with your breath in a very, very simple way. You don't have to learn the entire Kriya technique. I admit my bias. I love Kriya, but you can do a lot of work just working with the breath, simple meditation techniques. You need to learn how to behave. When I say you, I'm including myself. We all need to learn how to behave. Sri Teshwar used to say this to Yoganandaji. And that means we need to practice nonviolence in speech, in our words, in our thoughts. Can you do that? Are you just, when nobody is looking, think about that for a moment. Are you really? I mean, you have to be honest too. You can't just say, no, of course, because it's politically correct. No, you have to actually look at it when nobody's around and say, no, I could have done better there. I already mentioned and did a little bit of a soapbox about being a vegetarian. Read the Bhagavad Gita. It's a handbook. It's an absolute handbook for anybody that's interested in spirituality. It's a universal scripture. It's for people out there who are practicing Kriya, it is the handbook for Kriya yogis. There is so much in the Gita. I've been studying it for, 30 or 40 years. And I'm not being humble, I'm being accurate. I've just scratched the surface of the symbology of it. On the outer side, you can donate. Put your money on the table for some of these people. You're having financial problems. It's even more important to donate a little bit. $5. Give $5 to somebody that needs something. You will get it back. This is an ancient form. It's used in Jyotish. It's used in astrology as an upaya, as a remedy to help people. And finally, you know, you need to understand, and this is why I chose the picture, you need to have some humility and understand that you are not in charge. The Divine Mother's in charge. You know, you need to understand that she knows what she's doing. Her job is to help wake you up. And if she has to, you know, make a pandemic to do that, she will. She's not going to hesitate. Now, in that process, if you keep the attitude that I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow, I'm here to be free, then you are going to get a maximum amount of this. So anytime you take the attitude, this should not be, I should not have to deal with this pandemic. I should not have a wife who, or a husband who is a drug addict or an alcoholic or whatever. You're going to suffer for sure. Do you really know that we should not be having this? So my suggestion to you is really take this to heart, all of these things. I really thought carefully about this, and I humbly suggest you work with, just pick one and start to work with it. I did put meditation at the top again. I think that's the most important. But so I was much too ambitious, as I usually am, and now we have time for 1.5 questions, maybe. If anybody has anything they want to comment on or ask about, please unmute yourself and speak.
The thing that comes to my mind is when you said, I have to say I agree with you. I don't think Trump's going to win a second term. I think I agree. I think Biden's going to win. And that the thought has crossed my mind, though, is when he does lose, and I believe he will, I mean, like you say, he's not going to go quietly and peacefully.
No, and I think it's a good point you're making. Are you an astrologer, sir?
No, but I am a Kriya yogi, so I've been involved with Ananda for some time, and I've been in contact with some astrologers that are also part of Ananda, and we've had this conversation. So, but I am extremely beginner amateur when it comes to astrology. I mean,
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I didn't take the time because I ran out of time to demonstrate this more fully, why I think this is the case. But if you go deeply into it, it seems pretty clear to me, and I'm willing to be wrong on all of this. But I think that he definitely will go out fighting. That's his nature. We
I'm
see.
not fighting. I'm just listening to Ananda.
Hello. Somebody was trying to say something.
Dharma, can you say anything about when there'll be a change in the pandemic? Either it ends in some way, or there, becomes, a big shift, like would happen from a vaccine or something that gives us herd immunity or that kind of thing.
Right. That's an excellent question, and I'm turning to this is what I work from. This is the chart of the United States, and I didn't sit down and try to work that through. Here is I didn't talk about this too much, but let me answer it this way. This is the timing system for the United States, and we are right now in Rahu Jupiter, but the next period that we come into is Rahu Saturn. Now, typically when you have two negatives or two malefics like this, Rahu and Saturn, it's a tougher period. I think this period through, this is a start time, November 3rd, which is the election day. It's Tuesday, election day. Fascinating, huh? Is going to be a very difficult time. Is it the great period that the master spoke about? It very well could be. I had a very brief discussion one day with David Gamow, and I didn't get a chance to listen to his presentation yet. But I think that the financial things will continue on. I'm sort of answering the question a little bit differently. I think the financial stuff will continue on until 2023. And that has to do with the fact that I didn't speak about it, but Jupiter represents money. And but I did mention very, very quickly, probably too quickly, that the housing stuff will go on, housing sector problems, the tension in the race area, that sort of thing. You know, I think that by the time we get to the, if you look at the period after that, Mercury is still down in this area, but at least it's no longer Rahu. There's still going to be a lot of upheaval, you know, continuing on. This is, so what I'm saying is, I think that the period that we're just about to start in November is going to be a very difficult period for the United States, even possibly more difficult. I think that the financial stuff, but as far as the virus stuff is concerned, even in this period, the Mercury period, which is coming up in the foreseeable future here, we're getting now, you know, 6-7 years out, that will be better, but it will still be difficult. At least Mercury is very, very strong. I think that what will be different in 2023, once we get to that period, will be the technology. Rahu is the planet of technology, and I think that the Mercury here will help us understand. It's the planet of learning and education and business. So when we get to the Mercury period, this is a very rough answer because it's a very deep question, but I think that this Mercury period will definitely be better than the Saturn period in terms of business, in terms of the pandemic. Now, I can go another level out here. I could say, oh, in the Saturn period, where will it look better? I don't have time to answer that level of detail tonight, but that's a very general answer to that excellent question. Okay, anybody else have a question?
Oh, I don't know if it's Joe Prakash calling. I'm with the Treehouse. I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to be in living color with you guys. Something wrong with my camera. But I wanted to see if this was all tempered by sort of individual cures. I mean, obviously, for me, one of the aspects of the Vedic astrology is that people like yourselves are able to work inside individual astrology to ensure that there is balance. Can you just speak into the sort of the tempering of these things with cures, or, you know, obviously you gave a sort of a dharmic roadmap for us, but it's a little deeper than that for me, because I feel like there is the chart that you presented, you know, one could really panic over, you know, and so we've got as a collective, a dharmic sort of collective, and within our sort of starting within our own circle, but is it possible to really mitigate significantly based on our individual charts?
It's a great question. I believe, somebody correct me if this is wrong, I believe that sometimes when Yoganandaji gave a prediction, he would mention about free will. Free will can impact things. However, there is the notion in Jyotisha that there's the notion of 3 kinds of results: dhrita karma, adhrita karma, and dhrita karma. This means that there is karma that is very, very fixed. That's going to be very, very hard for you to change and take tremendous effort. And then there's karma that's going to be relatively easy to change and to work through. And then there's going to be stuff you're going to really have to put out effort, but if you work hard, you can get through it. So I'm reframing your question in that way, because that's how we look at it in the world of Jyotisha. So, you know, the Rahu period, I wouldn't put it, I guess I respectfully disagree that this is a time to panic. I don't think that, or however you said it, if I'm misquoting you, that we could get upset by this chart. It depends on what you want is the answer. It depends on what you want. Let me give you an example to answer your question, because some things are not going to be able to be mitigated. You can, not very easily, you can certainly work in that direction. And I gave you some ideas, but let me take an example. Take somebody like Swami Shivananda. Now, Indian mothers, they want to know what's happening with their boy. Is he going to get married? You know, will they get married? If you look at his chart, he doesn't have, you know, here's a man who became a doctor, was doing seva, doing service, and helping so many people, had tremendous spiritual potential, but he was a doctor. And one day he was at his clinic and a little boy came running and said, doctor, please come home, your house is on fire. He ran home and his house was engulfed in flames. There's no way to save it. And his wife and I believe he had a son, were inside. Now, from a human point of view, that's a disaster. But it so much shocked him that he became a great saint. He left and went to the Himalayas and started focusing his entire attention on God. And Yoganandaji said he was a master. So the reason I'm giving you this story, I'm trying to explain to you that if you're on a spiritual path, you're not here to see how many parties you can have with Jennifer Aniston or Will Smith or whoever else is out there. You're here to be free. And if you keep that attitude, I will quote from Gyanamata, Yoganandaji's most advanced woman disciple. It does not matter what happens to us. It's what we become from that experience that happens. So we can't control all of this stuff. All we can do is work in our own little world. I'm sorry, your name didn't come up and I didn't quite catch your name. You work with yourself, work with your own realm, and that's all you need to do. And you let Divine Mother take care of the rest. That would be my advice to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Heather Jyot Prakash.
Heather,
thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Very excellent question.
Thank you.
Is there a way we can listen to the recording?
Ramurti?
Yes. I don't know, we don't have the time set yet, but when we probably get the first 5 or 6 of these all recorded after we've had the classes, we'll put them on YouTube as a group.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we should probably call it, I'm sure there are more questions. I have more questions, but I think we should stop here. This would be a good place to stop. I thank you so much for your attention. And I guess I would just close by just saying, be at peace. The divine, trust in your Divine Mother. She knows what she's doing. And I'm a big believer in trust in God and tether your camel. Take practical steps. And the speakers that are coming, I know Kabir is going to be talking about that. Sure, take practical steps. Do what you can. But you don't have to give in to the pandemic of fear. You are a divine being. You always will be. Nothing can change that.